welcome everyone. My name is Tracy Artley. I am the Sustainability Programs Coordinator for U of M Plant Building and Ground Services. I'd like to thank everyone here for coming today. We're very excited to have all of you. We would like to also extend a very big thanks to Rich Robin, Director of U of M Plant Operation and the host of the MIAPA Senior Facilities Officers Conference, for making this visit by our distinguished guests possible today. Now, our audience has a broad familiarity with the ANSI standards development process and how it drives innovation. With all of the U.S. auto manufacturers agreeing to build the steering wheel, for example, on the left side of the vehicle, they are then free to innovate in other aspects of vehicles, for instance, developing electric cars. So with that, we'd like to welcome our guests from SAE International, located in Troy, Michigan. And we hope that you will meet with some of our students from the College of Engineering here today. We can confidently use a public drinking fountain or enjoy food from the Ross School's cafeteria because of water and food safety standards developed by an organization founded by U of M faculty in the 1950s. That organization is NSF International, and we would like to welcome representatives from that group here today as well. Now, we're sitting in this room with the assurance that the structural concrete poured during construction will keep the space functional, pleasant, and endure interior and exterior motions. We'd like to welcome our guests from the American Concrete Institute, located in Farmington Hills, Michigan. We may have some students present from our College of Architecture and Urban Planning who may want to speak with you later on after the talk. We can go to the doctor's office and know that the metrics necessary for clinical treatment will be available to the staff there. U of M is home to one of the top hospitals in the world that uses this data. And with that, we would like to welcome reps from Health Level 7, founded here in Ann Arbor in 1997. Michigan remains a manufacturing powerhouse because the Robotic Industries Association provides standards for engineers, managers, and executives to apply and justify robotics and flexible automation systems. Welcome to our guests from the Robotic Industries Association from Ann Arbor, and we too hope that you will meet with our representatives and our students from the College of Engineering here today. Now, the interior fittings of this building, like the carpet and the furniture, are affordable and sustainable because global manufacturers have a common platform to identify sustainable elements of the products. We'd like to welcome our guests from the Business and Institutional Furniture Manufacturers Association, located in Grand Rapids. They keep Michigan at the center of furniture manufacturing expertise. Welcome to our students to whom international standardization processes may be new. If you're a student, could you raise your hand? Welcome! You have so many people to talk to. Well, for students who come in, we may have some popping in from the Ross School of Business, the Ford School of Public Policy, as well as the Law School. We would like to welcome any faculty who are in attendance today. You can see some exciting public policy, law, and urban planning issues tracking through the standardization and innovation processes, and we urge you to visit the websites listed in the handout. And welcome to our staff, who have seen U of M's success in standards advocacy roll out over the past 17 years. I hope I haven't missed anyone here this afternoon. We have time allotted for questions and answers after the presentation. We will take questions from the audience first, and then with any time remaining, we will address some of the questions that were posted on our website ahead of time. I would also like to point out that on the back of your handout is a link to the presentation. So you can have that and follow along on your own computer if you so choose to. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Hank Beyer, our Associate Vice President for Facilities and Operations. Hank, it's all yours.
All right, I'm not mic'd, but I will speak up. And once again, thank Rich, but also Jack Janadeja and Mike Anthony, who's right there in the front. They were really the key people with a lot of perseverance and pulled all this together today. Much appreciated. I'm looking forward to the presentation. ANSI standards development processes continues to be important to the University of Michigan, and we strive to engage because we see an overall value of that engagement. others in higher education if they were to engage at a greater level in the development of ANSI standards, they will see benefits as well. So I'm looking forward to presentation this afternoon, and let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Bhatia, who's from ANSI. Prior to joining ANSI, he held the position of Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the International Group at Underwriters Laboratories. During his 30-plus year tenure with the organization, I'll do that, but
it's easy when you start at the age of 5.
I was going to say, you look very young. Mr. Bhatia assumed positions of progressive leadership in global business operations. His areas of responsibility included engineering, governmental and congressional liaisons, external affairs, follow-up certification services, and direction of UL's $300 million plus international operations. In 2013, Mr. Bhatia was elected to serve as president of the Pan American Standards Commission, COPAN. He previously served as COPAN vice president for 4 years. He also served as vice chair of the Industry Trade Advisory Committee on Standards and Technical Trade Barriers, ITAC 16, a joint program of U.S. Department of Commerce and U.S. Trade Representative. A member of the International Organization for Standards, or ISO Council, and its standing committees on strategies. He also holds a seat on the Oakland Community College Education Foundation Board, and recently retired as a member of the National Fire Protection Association Board of Directors. In addition to his numerous professional affiliations, Mr. Bhatia is a frequent lecturer in the United States, around the world, on topics such as international trade, technical developments, commercial market access, health and safety, and environmental concerns. Mr. Bhatia holds a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering, a Master of Science in Business Management. He and his wife, Kunita, have 2 sons. One of their sons is a graduate of the University of Michigan, as I understand it, and University of Michigan Medical School.
Business school.
Business school, excuse me. But he's a physician.
Yes.
So, he's part of the Michigan family, and Mr. Bhatia then is also part of the Michigan family. Please join me in welcoming him this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. Great to be here with you. Thank you for having me. Quite frankly, I was expecting a lot more students, so I was prepared to make a bunch of comments about students, but I'll still make them. You're here. And hopefully they'll show up when their class ends. I understand I'm competing with great weather and all the fun going on around the campus. So I really was asked to talk about ANSI and talk about standardization and address some of the key issues that we're trying to address from ANSI's perspective that will also be of interest to this community. I understand we have STOs here. Let's get started. So for those of you who don't know us, and several of you do, I just want to say that ANSI is the organization that takes care of the U.S. standards, codes, and compliance and conformity assessment system. And in many other countries, what we do here is really done by a government agency or a standards developing organization or an entity of government that does both. Well, we're neither. We're a 501c3 organization, not-for-profit, and we do not develop any standards, but we accredit all the standards developing activities in the private sector. And we basically do hundreds of those organizations that we feel are carrying out their job in a proper and essential requirement compliant manner. And we have about 236 of them, and several of them are in this room today. So let me get started by giving you a basic overview of what does ANSI really do. We represent U.S. Globally. We are the U.S. member body. We ensure the integrity of the U.S. standardization system, and we offer a neutral forum. So in addition to doing all that, we also accredit standards developing organizations as well as technical advisory groups that represent U.S. internationally And another element of our engagement that is very important, that's conformity assessment. So standard without compliance to a document is nothing but a piece of paper on which some words are written. So conformity assessment is the key element of demonstrating proper use and compliance to a document of standard that we have agreed to. So conformity assessment occurs for products, it occurs for systems, for quality management systems, for personnel, for anything. So ANSI coordinates that as well. And finally, we serve as a bridge between the public sector, the U.S. government and other governmental entities, as well as the private sector. And that's an important role. As you get into this activity, you realize that nothing much happens unless both sides of the economic activity are working together. Now, from the international perspective, ANSI is the U.S. member body of the ISO. Several of you know what that is, and IEC, which is the same international standard setting organization, but for the electrotechnical space. And we are, through our U.S. National Committee, a member of IEC and hold a permanent seat on that board as well, just like we do on the ISO. And there's a lot that goes on at the regional level because not everything is international. So we represent U.S. in the Pacific Area Standards Congress, PASC, that takes care of the Asia Pacific area. COPANT, you mentioned COPANT. I happen to be the president of COPANT right now. That covers the South America, Central America, North America, and all the Caribbean countries, about 36 of them. And we have a dialogue going on with the Europeans for the last 25 years on bilateral basis with CEN, CENELEC, and ETSI. And for the last several years, the European Commission has been part of that dialogue. So again, from their side as well, they have the public sector and the private sector participating. So the point here is that we connect at the international level, we connect at the regional level, and as you can see at the bottom of the slide, we have bilateral agreements with several organizations. The three that you see there is ABNT, is the Brazilian national standards body. SAC is the Chinese national standards body. So we have about 30 plus bilateral agreements with all the major economies of the world. So we can do anything we need to do diagonally, or we can do it directly, or we can do it tangentially with many entities involved. So that covers the international space. Fundamentally, we are basically a membership organization with about 125,000 companies represented in our federation, either through direct participation as members or as being part of trade associations, which includes many companies, and some are members either directly as well as through the organizations of their trade association. And we have about 3.5 million, we have about 3.5 million professionals involved in our activities representing the U.S. interest. Key point. Membership includes all the constituencies that you can think of, all the stakeholders involving academia, involving standards developing and certification bodies, government, manufacturing, you name it. Everybody that is affected in any way, shape, or form by either a standard or compliance to it is a member of ANSI. Here's a slide showing some of our accredited standards organizations. Some of them are here in the room today. I was told that there would be representatives from American Concrete Institute, HL7, SAE, NSF, BIFMA. I know you were here. You came, say hello. Welcome. And so we have 236 of these organizations that we accredit, and that number keeps going up every day. Now, the U.S. standardization system is really a very interesting dynamic because it's a public-private partnership. It's not a top-down system as it exists in most of the countries in the world, especially the developing or the smaller countries, especially the countries that are not industrially engaged or very advanced in their infrastructure for private sector lean. So in our system, we, for the most part, lead the standardization process through the private sector, but government is a very active and willing partner. And there are rules and laws that guide that behavior. And the behavior is guided by National Technology Transfer and Advancement Act. And that NTTAA has been in effect for about 20 years. It basically directs all the federal agencies to rely on private sector processes as much as possible. Of course, they have the ultimate right to develop a document or a regulation if they choose to do that. But their first priority is to look to the private sector to see if they can find a standardization solution, a conformity assessment and compliance solution. And if they cannot, then they have to rationalize why they are going to go through an initiative of their own. And this saves our economy, our country, hundreds of billions of dollars, and it has over the years. It avoids duplication of effort, and it allows the agencies to really carry out their mission without investing repetitive funds and securing technical expertise that they can't possibly assemble in all areas that they're responsible for. So I was telling somebody that the private sector enjoys the benefit of government engagement. There are about 5,000 or more government employees who participate in over 500 standards developing committees. That was data about a couple of years ago. I don't know what the number is. It's probably as good, if not higher, today. So that has always worked well for us. In terms of the ecology of the system, quite frankly, the incorporation of a standard into law is something that government agencies do from time to time. We call that incorporation by reference, or IBR. That basically says that they'll take a private sector standard, they'll reference it as a regulation to satisfy their congressional mandate, and that becomes then the law of the land. And in our country, the updating and development of that is based on the need, and that's done continuously in the private sector. The participation that continues from the government side must be maintained. So there's been a dialogue that's been going on for several years now, 3-4 years, where some individuals are beginning to say that if it's the law, it should be made available for free. So don't sell the standard. So the standards developing organization in this country rely on the sale of the document, as does ANSI, as does ISO, as does IEC and other organizations globally, to carry out their work. After all, there are only so many ways to pay for that activity. And that ecosystem is very critical for us to maintain, because what we want is a balanced system in which there is no dominant interest. Well, some people will say, why don't you let the government pay for it? They can pay for it. It's not a bad thing. Well, it is a bad thing, because you don't want a dominant interest at the table. You want all the participants to be there to represent their interests so that the best solution comes out. What happens if the government funding dries up, which we have seen happen? What happens if the budgets are down at a given agency? Do we stop development of the standard? Do we let innovation just stand still? Do we let the updating or revisions not happen? No, that's not right. So we do not want a dominant process which is funded by government. We want the process to be private sector supported and led, and we want government to be a partner in that. Luckily, most of the government agencies are supportive of that concept, and they are looking to maintain that activity. And for our part, we're trying to do our bit to make the information freely available while still maintaining the ability to monetize that intellectual capital that we have so collectively and so difficultly put together. So we do that by perhaps doing a couple of things. And now here's a picture of the Capitol. And ANSI.org IBR is a site that we have created which allows us to host all the IBR standards, and there are hundreds of them, and including ISO and IEC documents. And I worked very hard with the board of ISO and board of IEC to get their permission to display them at this website, where we can reference, if you will, all the IBR standards. And we have hosted this website basically for the benefit of the small to medium-sized organizations. Large ones, several of them, have their own site, and we have hot linked them to this site, as well as several federal agencies and several other organizations are tied in. So our goal is to create a centralized source of information where people can see what the law is that applies to them, yet it retains the rights for the SDOs to protect their intellectual capital and monetize it and continue the work that they've been doing, which has been supporting the needs of the government and the needs of the private sector. So I think this will continue to be a debate, quite frankly, for some time to come. And one of the reasons this will continue to be a debate is because there is not a good understanding of what standardization is all about. People don't pay attention to this process. They don't understand it. And the higher you go in an organization, less understanding there is. So if you talk to the CEOs or the C-suite executives, they don't have any focus on this subject unless and until there's a major economic ramification. Either a big order was lost or there's a lawsuit, then it becomes an issue of focus. So we have launched, if you will, a program called Standards Boost Business. This is a campaign run by ANSI, but not singularly. We have 30 partner organizations. Some of them are members, that one or two might even be here. I think they are involved. And what we're trying to do is educate and inform high-level policy people both at the private sector level, and it may also happen in the academic level, because we need to inform the senior people here. And we are basically conveying the message that standards are important to you, because they impact not only your objectives and your mission, but they also impact your bottom line. And I go and talk to the boards of various organizations. I'll be glad to come and talk to the senior executives here. Somebody suggested, I think you did, that I should come and talk to the CFOs of various universities, because they're the ones who are controlling the purse strings. You guys are fortunate in Michigan. Perhaps you have the resources which you are allowed to spend on investing in this area, but some of them don't. So I think the program that we have, Standards Boost Business, is going to be a program that will be successful only if the policymakers at the highest level and the CEOs and the C-suite executives understand that they need to continue to make commitment to the standardization activities, because it does affect their bottom line. Earlier in the presentation that I made to your group, I said that 85% of the global commodity trade is impacted by standards or their application or their compliance. Now, I don't know what those numbers are for this year, but last year, based on the Department of Commerce data, that meant $13 trillion to U.S. So $13 trillion of our economy is impacted by standards and their application. So if a CEO doesn't understand that and can't calculate how that affects their industry, their business, their future, I think they're going to need some further convincing. So we have developed a number of case studies on how it has worked for various companies. We have developed testimonials, and several of them are available for free for anybody to use. This is a site available to anybody. And a lot of data and a lot of convincing arguments exist there. And I'll quote to you one statement that has been made by Russ Cheney. He's a member of our board. He's the president and CEO of IAPMO plumbing organization. And here's what Russ said. He said, if a company or an organization is unsure about participation in standards development, I would remind them that in the absence of their participation, others and their competitors will decide their destiny. I don't think anybody, whether it's in the manufacturing sector or in the code implementation sector or in the training sector, would want someone else, particularly a competitor, determining their future. It's a very powerful statement. I think it talks about the importance of standards and about the importance of getting involved in the development work and maintenance of it, and make sure that you are there to advance your agenda and protect your interest. Now, next slide is quite a detailed thing. I don't think you need to worry about reading it. You'll have it in your presentation copy. But basically, it's a good thing. It's kind of complex because it talks about all the different ways you can get involved with ANSI. And I'll be glad to talk to you a little bit more in detail if you like, or you can follow up with us and my staff to perhaps express your interest and your desire to either get involved in some of these activities or suggest some changes in the way we're conducting them. We're always open to new ideas and new suggestions. So ANSI convenes a lot of standardization and conformity assessment activities, but we also do something which I think is probably the most important thing we do. We look at the national priorities, we look at the global challenges, and we look at the emerging technological trends, and we convene forums. They're called workshops, they're called collaboratives, they're called initiatives that decide how to advance a solution through standardization for issues that face our nation, that face our society, that face our manufacturing community, that face all of us. So when we had the 9/11 attack, the Department of Homeland Security through White House came to us and said, we need help. Would you help us develop the appropriate standards for security, for Homeland Security? And we formed the Homeland Security Standards Panel. It still goes on. We're still doing that work because that work will never be done because there are always challenges emerging. When nanotechnology became a new technology which was being used and deployed in various industry sectors, we formed that panel. There are tons of people involved in that. When we had just recently talked about energy efficiency and we looked at the energy efficiency space and we decided we're going to work on the energy efficiency in the built environment as our first step, and we formed the EESCC. I have a tough time saying that. EESCC, and that has 236 members. And just last year, I'm sorry, not true, just this year, they released a roadmap which outlines 125 different recommendations on how to make energy efficiency more realizable in the built environment. And phase 2 of that is going on now. So I think this is an opportunity for organizations like University of Michigan and others to get involved and make an impact on how this should be done. Some of it requires identifying new standard solutions. Some of it involves applying what exists. Some of it involves creating a harmonized set of solutions that can be applied throughout the country. And there are similar things going on. And one of the other ones that I think you should pay attention to is smart cities, smart and sustainable cities. Well, you have a smart and sustainable small city right here. I mean, this is just like a small and sustainable city. I think there's no different requirements here. You need energy efficiency, you need distribution, you need power generation, you need backup systems. You have built-in other application. You have hospitals, you have stadiums. I'll be going to one tomorrow. I'm excited about that. So, I mean, smart and sustainable cities is an initiative that's going on in every major country. When I go to the General Assembly meetings of ISO and IEC, we have bilateral dialogues with Germany, with France, with China, with Brazil, with all the major players. And each and every one of these countries is telling me what they're doing in their country to address this need. Why? Because many of the cities in the developed economies are older. Infrastructure is breaking down. The needs are getting bigger. Cities are getting more intensified. About half the population in the world is going to be living in cities, and that's going to go up to 75% in about 20 years. So that means the needs are stronger. You need to figure out how to interconnect. You need to figure out how to take care of transportation, education, hospitalization, you name it. So that's an issue facing us all. So we have formed a webinar-based program in which we have monthly webinars, and we're addressing this issue by assembling all the experts, and we hope to establish a collaborative in the near future, and I hope you'll be part of that at some point. So these are the type of things we do. Take a look at this. It'll be in your presentation, and see if there are any areas here that you want to get involved. Maybe nuclear energy standards coordination, tickles your interest. Maybe product standards for sustainability, maybe chemical regulations, ID theft. There's plenty going on, and there'll be more going on. And if there are areas that you want us to get involved in, especially with an organization like yours that we were talking about today, which has a huge footprint in this economy, you may have initiatives you want us to think about undertaking with your leadership and with your partnership. So keep that in mind. I already mentioned smart cities. Already mentioned ESCC. Let me talk about something new that is going on, which we haven't talked about, and that is the WorkCrete program. I think WorkCrete, I think this is an initiative that is focused on our national economy suffering from a skill gap. Excuse me, I need a little water. I think not right now, but about a year and a half ago when we were all after Obama saying, create jobs, and he said, well, there are openings. There were 2 million openings, and there were 2 million people looking for work, except they couldn't find the match. And one of the reasons is that job seekers can't find the right credentials to demonstrate their capability, and the employers can't find qualified staff or properly judge their background and their credentials to fit them into their organization. And I mentioned earlier, like, if you take example of all the people that are working in DOD, all the Army, armed personnel, armed services personnel that come back to the private sector, how do you judge, if you're an employer and trying to hire them, how do you judge their credentials and their training and their capability so that you can place them in the right place in your organization? How do you pay them? What do you call their grade? What is their qualification? So challenges like that are being faced not only by them, but by Veterans Administration, by Post Office, by other federal agencies. So Department of Education and 9 other federal agencies have been involved in this. We're working with George Washington University right now and Lumina Foundation to create, if you will, a competency-driven credentialing ecosystem for the U.S. It's going to be a major initiative, and basically it's going to require us to develop an infrastructure to address this need with a lot of engagement from private sector. And we have segregated that from the ANSI activity because right now we also credential, if you will, programs that are doing personnel credentialing certification. So in order to segregate the two so there's no conflict, we have created that as a separate entity. So you guys being experts, if you will, at the academic level, understanding the processes and perhaps engaging your brain power would be very capable of advising us. And I know that one of your organizations, Rich, that we talked about earlier, is involved in personnel credentialing for people that are deployed in plant and facility management. So certainly we could do something in that space together. So it brings me now to the final slide here. And I was keeping in mind different types of people that would be in this room. Keeping that in mind, I thought I would give you some ideas on how perhaps students and the academic part of the audience may get more involved with ANSI. First, you may consider a partnership with WorkRit, like I just said. Secondly, you could talk about something that we do in our university outreach program, which actually helps bring standards into the classroom. So as professors and as a teaching institution, you can take advantage of thousands of ISO and IEC and other standards that can be made available to universities as a training exercise in the classroom, in the learning environment, and we'll be glad to participate with you on that. You may, as item 3, you may want to join our Committee on Education, which is really a committee which is focused on academic outreach. We have 11 universities currently participating in that. You may want to think about participating yourself. Fourth, I would hope that you will consider your students to enter what we have every year. It's a paper competition. It's focused around standardization and business issues. This year's theme is Standards Inspire Innovation. And the papers are due by April 30th. And we announce the winner at the National Annual World Standards Week. You are there sometimes. And hopefully there'll be interest in that. And finally, as ANSI's educational members are active participants in Company Member Forum, some of the key issues that are being developed by Company Member Forum, the business community part of it, are focused on cybersecurity, interoperability, impact of legislation, management system standards, and future of standardization. So as academics, I think you would make some great contributions to those subjects. So you may want to think about participating in the CMF. So if you became a fuller member, like a full member as opposed to basic, you can participate in all of these activities. There's no fees or charges once you're a full member. So you may want to think about that. Now, on the standards and operational front, there are a lot of things you could do. And I don't want to repeat the slides that I showed earlier, but I will tell you that some of the things that are important is looking at how you can impact what goes on in the international arena, because ultimately it'll come back to affect us here if it's not doing it already. So you can work in the international tags. You can take a leadership role. U.S. has 574 leadership positions in ISO and 160 in IEC. You could be part of one of those if that area suits your need or your focus, or you could start a new one. I think the ISO IEC standards process is pretty similar to the U.S. process because it's based on what we did here many years ago. And I think the processes are not the issue. The issue is, do you want to be involved in certain tags? TAG is Technical Advisory Group. These are mirror committees to support and develop our input into the international process. And if you want to take a leadership role or to be a member of a TAG, that's very important. Somebody was talking about a committee in the earlier session, and you could really be on that TAG. You could actually lead that TAG if you wanted to, if it involved enough interest among your community. So these are the type of things I think you should think about doing. And as I said earlier in my first group's talk, academic community is very, very much underrepresented at the standardization table, because the standardization process is based on engagement of all affected constituencies. For the footprint that you have economically and in terms of engagement of the standards, if you will, through which your business is conducted, is so critical because it affects your efficiency, it affects the way you do business, it affects the way you achieve your cost-saving objectives. And if you're there, you have the ability to guide the direction of those dialogues and those solutions. And I think for that reason, it's very critical that you get more involved in standardization aspects too, because you'll also bring viewpoints that we haven't heard from. We do need to hear them. So with that, I'll close my comments, and time permitting, I'll be glad to answer your questions. Thank you.